Welcome to the BC Search and Rescue Association's AdventureSmart Expert Webinar Series.
Tonight, it's CoastSmart ambassadors Shandy Kariatsumari and Krissy Montgomery.
I'll just do a little introduction first about search and rescue, and then I will introduce our guests. I wanted to talk about the region specifically because it is very unique versus the rest of the province. We have a very healthy province with volunteers. There are 78 search and rescue groups in the province of BC. Those consist of 3,400 search and rescue volunteer members. They're all volunteers, and they respond collectively in the entire province to 1,500 search and rescue calls every year. That keeps everyone busy. They're all skilled, highly trained, as Scott is, one of those 3,400, unpaid professionals who are there to help you in need, to bring you home to safety, and to work in your community and really keep everyone in a safe space and help everybody reach their destination. And your destination is home. Actually, it's a good way to think about that. We always think it's the beach or the summit or the river or the paddle or the peak or the view. And it's always home. Those that I just listed, they're only halfway. They're only halfway. You have to get back home safe and sound. Let's talk about West Coast Inland Search and Rescue for just a couple of minutes, and then I will introduce our guests. West Coast Inland Search and Rescue consists of 27 active members. Some search and rescue groups have members in training. This group here for this region has 27 active members. Their area of operations covers a vast area from the south to the Broken Group Islands and to north to Nootka, following the spine of the island. Their searches vary. That when they're tasked out, it varies for many different things. It could be a search in the park. It could be looking for despondents. Could be supporting another search and rescue group as mutual aid. All the search and rescue groups help each other when they can, when there's need, based on capabilities, skills, and training. And at times, unfortunately, there's body recoveries. That goes for all search and rescue, not just this one uniquely, but different types of calls in this area could be for a surfer in distress. It could be for coastal hikers getting stranded by the tide. That goes back to a little bit of trip planning. We'll talk a lot about that this evening. And then at times, if they're being stranded by the tide, sometimes rescues are at 2 or 3 in the morning. And so those search and rescue volunteers are coming out in the middle of the night to help. Even hikers slipping on the shoreline can result in broken wrists and injuries that way. And they definitely, I was just speaking to a search and rescue volunteer yesterday about this presentation tonight, and she was referencing how much they see enthusiasts on the water without life jackets, without personal flotation devices. There's so much that goes into education. There's so much that goes into reaching the community, residents and travelers too. And Tofino's a small area. The whole coastline there, Hewlett and Tofino, is a small community. And even though there's a lot of resources to respond and help you and educate you, they're available, it really places a toll also on a very small community that works very hard to welcome you, to educate you, and to help you in need when there's emergencies. So prevention is its worth is weight in gold. Let me jump into introducing Krissy. Krissy is an avid surfer and the owner-operator of Surf Sister Surf School in Tofino, right in Tofino. She has a great shop, by the way. I pop in every time I come into town. She is a founding member of the British Columbia Association of Surf Instruction and co-creator and organizer of the Queen of the Peak Women's Surf Championships. Krissy is passionate about traveling, and in her spare time, you can find her, I found this very funny, golfing poorly. That's the funny part. Good for you for trying, though. I just don't try. At that one anyway, and hanging out with her rescue dogs. So thank you for having rescue dogs as well. Our second guest, the two of them will share their expertise tonight. Shandy is a Live to Surf Shop team rider and a local coach offering international life-saving and federation and judging courses. Shandy brings unique ideas to all surfers, offering feminine approaches, dry land and life-saving techniques for holistic surfing, long-term athleticism, I love that, leadership, inspiration, and courage. Krissy And Shandy, the stage is yours, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah, so a little background too about myself and Shandy. Funnily enough, we met about 26 years ago, when both of us were actually chambermaids at Ocean Village Beach Resort. So we kind of have since then lived our Blue Crush dreams, and now both of us work in sort of the water surf industry. So yeah, we've come a long way, Shandy.
But we have our roots together.
Exactly.
That's great.
So we're just going to walk you guys through just a few slides here, just to talk about the Tofino area, and we're going to be talking a lot about CoastSmart as well. But before we get started, we just want to respectfully acknowledge the unceded traditional territory of the Taloquiet First Nation of the New Channel of Peoples and the traditional keepers of our land. There are stewards of our land here in Tofino, so just want to make that land acknowledgement.
This is a beautiful overview of the whole area as well, and just shows how dynamic it is, but also how much water is there. It's everywhere on every edge around us.
Okay, so Tofino sort of as a snapshot. I'm sure a lot of you know, are very well versed in Tofino, but Tofino is, for those who aren't, Tofino is a small community located on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Our year-round population is about 2,500 residents, although in the summertime with seasonal staff, that kind of bumps up usually to around 5,000 or 6,000 people. But as an international tourist destination, Tofino hosts close to about 1 million people annually. And then despite us being a beach town, we're actually Surf City, Canada. There are no lifeguards on any of the beaches here. And a common misconception is like Coast Guard, be it we have a fantastic crew. It is not the Coast Guard's job to patrol the surf zone. So any rescues that are done in that zone must be self-rescue or other Good Samaritans around. So you can kind of see how with 1 million visitors coming to the area and a lot of them there for beach activities, it is a bit of a hot zone. So the other kind of alarming statistic is that we only have one very small underfunded hospital that services Tofino, Ucluelet, and all the Indigenous and surrounding communities on the West Coast. So we're just kind of painting the picture that, yeah, Tofino, it is a hot spot, but it definitely, you can see how the trouble brews over here.
Welcome to Tofino.
Yeah. So some of the activities that we're going to be kind of talking about when we talk about the coastal zone, we're talking about things that you do in that area, such as like hiking, beach exploration, stand-up paddleboarding, there's kiteboarding, storm watching, and of course, our favorite, surfing.
And keep note that none of these activities are regularly supervised. We do have the surf schools teaching surf lessons and surf schools renting equipment. But again, hazards do exist. Our lifeguards are non-existent at this point. We just have lifesavers, and they're already there in another role, instructing or surfing themselves, or have another job that they're hired to be there for. So best thing you can do is become CoastSmart.
We're going to be referencing a lot what CoastSmart is. And CoastSmart essentially is a public safety pilot project that was kind of co-created or led by the Parks Canada, as well as the districts of Tofino and Ucluelet. And it's essentially designed to kind of enhance coastal safety and safety in the shoreline and the surf zone. So it's a great website. We're definitely going to point you guys all to that resource. There's tons of information on there about prevention, and lots of there's a great informative quiz that we're going to encourage you all to take. So when we're talking about CoastSmart, we just really want to direct you back to that website because there's tons of good information on there. So what we're going to be talking about here, we're going to be bringing up a bunch of hazards that we see in this kind of surf zone, and kind of going to walk through on how to be CoastSmart essentially, and how to avoid getting into any sort of trouble. So the first sort of area we're going to talk about is beach flooding, terrain traps, and tides. Sudden beach flooding can occur, especially when there's like large swell and big tides. So you'll see a lot of this in the wintertime. So generally speaking, in the winter is when we get sort of our bigger wave season. Summertime tends to be a little bit smaller, but this can still happen on the daily, in even in summertime. So we've chosen this slide here to show you. This is actually an overview. It's a beautiful slide of Frank Island, and you're looking back onto North Chestermans and South Chestermans. This is just a great example of how like an incoming tide can isolate rocks from the headland and from the shore and leave you stranded. So it's a beautiful walk at low tide, but you can see this tombolo or isthmus essentially. You can get yourself into some trouble. But Shandy, tell us how to prevent that from happening.
So, if you're looking at this, you really want to know your tides at all times in Tofino. Our terrain is very flat. When you ask geologists, we've got a flat area. So when the tide comes in, it covers a lot of distance. And our tides can swing 14 feet. And if we've got a high tide and a low tide every 6 hours, we've got a lot of change throughout the day. And it's not that the high tide and the low tide stay the exact same time every day. They shift about 50 minutes. So you always got to kind of keep on your toes and check those tide charts. That way you're going to know exactly when the low tide is, which is the best time to go for your walk along the beach. But you do always have to keep your eyes on the water. You want to keep yourself alert. We've all been stuck where we didn't realize that the water was going to come in so far. And, lo and behold, our shoes are wet one more time. Our kids' rubber boots are soaked one more time. And, a lot of experience goes into the water, but if you keep your eyes on the water, you'll see these things, you'll see them in advance. You want to look and see if there's any storms or swells coming in that are going to accentuate a high tide or a tide coming in. On this slide here too, if you look at the two different sandbars that go around from north to south, they can meet each other and they will go from this sort of look all the way up to the entire area is covered in water right up to the tree line. So it is a big overview, but there's a large distance that the water is going to move.
I've actually had the opposite experience when I was paddleboarding and I went out and the tide dropped low. And when I tried to come back in through the mud flats, there was no more water. So I had a very embarrassing muddy trek to get back in. So
And a long walk.
exactly. Another major hazard here on the West Coast is cold water. Our water temperature here ranges from about 7 to 14 Celsius. So yeah, in the wintertime, it does get pretty chilly. In the summer, even on the warmest days, even out there today, it was maybe 12 to 13 Celsius. So it's cold year round. And as we all know, cold water exposure can be lethal. Just even getting into cold water, if you've ever jumped in the ocean here, it can take your breath away. That breathlessness and that increased heart rate can be dangerous. It can lead to unconsciousness and also to hypothermia. So in an adult, hypothermia can set in as quickly as 15 to 25 minutes. So that's quite alarming. Like today I was down at the beach, saw, a lot of people playing in the water without wetsuits on. And, it's okay for a few minutes, but you can imagine that if it's setting in, hypothermia is setting in about 15 minutes in an adult, in a child, it can be even less than that. So we definitely want to be very cautious of those cold temperatures because unexpected entry is not uncommon. So what we mean by that is lots of the times you didn't even intend on getting wet. But again, maybe you went walking at the incorrect tide, you got isolated and you had to come back in through the water. And a really interesting statistic is that 20% of people who are drowning victims or injured didn't even intend on going in the water in the first place. So planning for the cold water is essential.
Cold plunges are great, but you really want to go at high tide when you've got less distance to get down to the water and back to that hot tub or that sauna. And it's going to be a little bit safer. You know where the water is going because it's kind of reaching its max for that day. But the best thing you can do is enter the water with proper equipment. A wetsuit of 4.3 or warmer is ideal. You can see in this photo, I'm wearing a full 5'4" wetsuit with gloves on and booties. I still did that today. I didn't have my gloves on. That was the bonus on a sunny day here in the middle of summer. But I still wore my hood. I still had, even 8 mil booties that were worn out, and they work well in the summertime. So a proper fit of your wetsuit is key as well. If your suit's too big and it's like too comfortable, it's probably going to be flushing water and you're going to be getting cold throat in a sort of hypothermic way. So the tighter it is, the better it's gonna fit. It will be kind of like a second skin. It's a tight onesie. Krissy and I were joking that we actually have wetsuit muscles, and these are muscles specifically to get our wetsuits on and our wetsuits off. And they have nothing to do with surfing, and they're, essential for here. So if it fits really nice and tight, then it's gonna seep through the fabric and it won't do any of that cold water flush. The great thing about our wetsuits is that because of their thickness, they're going to be like a life jacket. So you've got a buoyancy factor that's going to keep you safe. You do want to use extreme caution of wading or going for a quick cold water plunge. If you're wading and you've got shoes on, they're going to drag you down. And if you ever have any issues where you're not meaning to swim and you've gotten, a little further out than you want to take those shoes off first. If you have baggy clothing and heavy footwear would be the first things that you take off because they're just gonna like pull you under and then you go from the bottom up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Shandy and I were talking about a very good and shocking drill is to get into the water with your clothes on and then try to take them off. You'll see that it's not as easy as what you think when you're in that water, but it is a really important piece in drowning prevention is if, yeah, you unexpectedly fall into that water with heavy boots on, get those things off as quick as possible.
The trickiest actually are rubber boots because once the water goes in there, they're gonna suction to your foot. And I don't know if it's, possible sometimes to get them off, but it's good to have that awareness. Better to wear a wetsuit.
Yeah, just do all your activities in a wetsuit.
We pretty much do. Oh, just moving the next slide here.
Awesome. All right, so another hazard that we see at the beach here a lot is actually moving logs and debris. We've all seen it. You can see here's a photo from our local area here. You can see how the logs can pile up. And the high tides and big waves can often shift or dislodge those logs from the beach. Those logs can actually get pulled back into the water. Sometimes in the water in that surf zone as well, you can run into marine debris such as crab traps and floats, which can be a hazard, ropes, things like that. So, again, it's really important to be aware of your surroundings. I had one where I was actually, I believe I was boogie boarding actually at Mackenzie Beach on a really big day. And we all had to exit the water because, a giant log floated right through the surf zone. So, everybody at the beach kind of coordinated with each other and helped each other get out just to avoid that log, that movement. So, bit alarming to see, but yeah, definitely, watch out for that. A shocking statistic is that it only takes about 4 inches of water to move a log that weighs a ton. So a ton, if you want to imagine, that's basically the size of like an SUV or a truck. So a log that big, it only takes 4 inches of water to move that. And Shandy's got an alarming story of this, kind of situation happening.
We do get smarter through experience, but also lucky at the same time. I'll just add before my story that we do have vehicles that are turned upside down underneath the sand in various areas here that sometimes do get pulled out with different storms, and all of a sudden you see the bottom of the vehicle and its tires. Also, I've had the moment, at Cox Bay and I'm surfing and something hits my leg and I pulled up what that something was, and it was somebody's lawn chair because at low tide they figured, it's okay to have the chair down there, and then they didn't think about it. The tide came in and now we're surfing with it. But I did have a great experience going down to China Beach, which is closer to the Victoria area and Sombrio, and it was during a high tide with lots of swell. So it's great for surfing if you're capable of those moments. And I did have a good surf, but when I came in, the tide was quite high and I just hadn't thought about it. So I finished my surf session. I came in on the log similar to this, and I found a nice strong log to sit on, and I straddled my legs so that I was just resting and ready to, take off my booties and climb up the stairs again. But that 4 inches of water came up underneath the logs, not something that I had thought about at that point, and it lifted the log in front of one of my legs and it squished it around that leg. I was lucky enough that that's all it did. It moved a couple inches, but it was enough that I wasn't able to walk for 6 weeks from that. So be alert to logs, both in and around the water. Have that knowledge that it takes nothing for it to start floating. Um, Stay off of it. I know that now. Be patient and watch the ocean and surrounding for some time to get the whole picture. So it might look like this picture where the mid tide is got lots of room and sand there, but the tide does start to come in pretty fast at the mid tide. And there can be a set where all of a sudden it goes a lot further than, the 10 waves before that you were watching. So all these things are possible. The ocean is the one who tells us what it's going to do.
Yeah. All right, so another hazard, of course, is your classic slips, trips, and falls. We've all biffed it on the rocks here before. You want to go check out some starfish or some, anemones at low tide. You just, have to be really cautious because our coastline, it's primarily volcanic rock. The most of the rocks in the area too are coated with seaweed or, could be mussels, other types of shells. So very sharp, very dangerous. And again, reminder of like the logs at the beach, even though they are fun to play on, they can definitely shift and move. So definitely want to be cautious.
Yeah, you want to wear proper footwear. I think the biggest one is know the terrain. Start getting to learn. All our kids and all of us, we know exactly which rocks look like the ones that will have texture and traction on, and which rocks look slippery or are slippery. And we've kind of tested that out with a lot of time walking around. Avoid the cliffs and edges. That goes without saying, but especially at a rising tide, and then stay on the trails. It's going to have more traction, and there's an obvious reason why the trail is a safe zone. Wildlife, we do have out here everything from cougars, wolves, bears, sea lions, whales, and we do have sharks. They are out in the open outer area where their food source is, not so much in our walking area, and lots of jellyfish.
Yeah, so a couple ways you can be coast-smart is just, for one, just be alert and respectful. Know that you're in their territory. If, for example, a sea lion that you might see out at Long Beach starts presenting himself or showing themselves out of the water, barking quite aggressively, just it's time to go in. It's their turn to have fun in the surf. Just avoid it. Remember that you're in their zone. So with some of these predators too, like with cougars and bears and wolves, there are different protocols. We're not going to go into, depth about any of that. But what we are going to go into depth about is the most dangerous animal in the water, and that is other humans. So what creates most of the accidents in the surf zone, it's not sharks eating people, it's not the jellyfish or the whales, it's humans hitting other humans. And so we just want to touch on a bit of surf etiquette. And surf etiquette is very close to my heart, of course, as a surf school owner and an instructor for the last 21 years. This is something that we cover in every single lesson. And this is just that so that everybody can have fun safely. So the number one golden rule in surfing is that there's only one surfer allowed per wave. So, when we talk about this golden rule, we talk about like when we're surfing out the back, surfing a green wave, such as me right here. There's only one person allowed on this wave. If Shandy wanted to go as well, chances are we're going to collide. And this is what causes all the tension at the beach. This is why people fight. This is why there's accidents. It's essentially like you're driving down the highway in your car and having someone merge right into the lane in front of you. You've got all the speed and momentum behind you. There's a very good chance you're just going to run into that person. It's very, very dangerous. So when we talk about surf etiquette, we're talking about, one surfer per wave. When you're in the whitewash zone, it's a little bit different because we're all surfing in the same direction. So when you're in the whitewash kind of beginner zone, it's a lot more common sense rules. Shandy, do you want to talk a bit about these or?
Yeah, you want to have your own runway is the best way of explaining it. So if you look in front of you and you're ready to go in towards the shore, that runway, that airplane strip needs to be clear, and then you can take off. You
That's
can,
great.
navigate a little bit of direction because the board will be pushed by the wave in different angles, but that's going to be your clear zone there. If you hold onto your board at all times, either it's under your belly or it's under your feet or it's back in your hands, then you're going to keep yourself and everybody else safe. Usually, we're with a 9-foot board. It's going to have a 9-foot leash, and that's an 18 to 20-foot chaos zone. So we do want to have the board in our hands if it's not, something or a time that we're riding. It's tricky to do when we go out into the green waves. So if you're about to do that, you really need to learn how to turtle roll that board, keep it in your hands. You also need to duck dive it if you've got a short board and you're working with that. If you ever are going out to the green wave and you're trying to progress, but you're not able to keep that board in your grip, then my suggestion would be that you find a softer day. You find a place where there is nobody around you, which is going to be hard to do in the summertime, maybe early in the morning or maybe just a different season. You got to find a place where you can still hold on to that board. That's the number one rule for surfing etiquette while you're going into the lineup. I also agree that our signs show a lot, but there's more things to learn as you're in that lineup. And one of the biggest things is that when you're surfing on that wave, you need to be the one that has control of keeping everybody else safe. If you're shooting out your board or if you're not able to surf around a person that's trying to paddle out, then you're going to cause a little bit more danger than necessary. The person paddling out isn't able to do a lot. You do, as a paddler, want to aim for the whitewater and go behind. So if you see Krissy's wave there, I'm going to go behind into that whitewash and she can move forward. That's going to be a way that I can help her. But if there's nothing I can do, it's Krissy's responsibility, I would say, as a surfer, to be able to control that board around me. She's got the most control at that time and the most speed.
So, if any of this is too much, or you're like, what are they talking about? Please, please come take a lesson. We can talk about this topic forever. But yeah, just what you need to remember in the beginning is there are rules out there. There is an etiquette. Familiarize yourself with this sign. There's also countless YouTube videos as well too that explain this topic into much greater detail. All right, so another danger in this area that we do have to be aware of is tsunamis. We are not going to go into much detail about this because this is a whole other webinar for another day. But essentially, it's just a good reminder that the entire west coast of Vancouver Island is in the tsunami zone. And this obviously includes our local communities here, Tofino and Ucluelet. But this does include Port Alberni as well, even though it's perceived as an inland community. It's also in the tsunami zone. So yeah, just a couple things you can do when you're visiting the area is just familiarize yourself with evacuation routes. You'll see there's those tsunami warning signs everywhere. So just, have a look, pay attention. Another great thing to do if you live here is to subscribe to tsunami alerts, or if you're visiting the area, great to know. And then kind of remember too the golden rule of 20 meters in 20 minutes. And what that means is if we are to feel a very strong localized earthquake, we feel a ton of shaking. Once that shaking has subsided and you're safe to move, you want to try to increase your elevation by about 20 meters in the next 20 minutes, just in case there is a tsunami warning. So we do have a very great alert system here. And again, not going to go into much detail about this, but just be aware as in our surf zone here, we do have to be cautious of that we are in a tsunami zone as well.
Yeah, and once you're here, you're going for high ground, but you're stuck here. You're going to have to go further out than Port Alberni to get into a safe zone.
All right, just going to talk a little bit about surge channels. So surge channels are those narrow inlets on rocky shorelines that can kind of quickly fill with water. You can see this slide here. This is actually up at Pettinger Point or Sunset Point at Cox Bay. And this surge channel can go from completely dry to, about 10 feet or more of depth in seconds. So it's a very, very dangerous area to enter the water, this surge channel or surge channels in general.
You do want to keep your eyes on the water for this one, and there's lots of changes. It'll move in and out, but it also goes up and down. So a key is learning your surf forecast beforehand. That includes the tides, but you're looking at swell size, swell strength, swell period. The wind can affect it a little bit, but those are the main things that you want to keep an eye on. I do a lot of my rescue techniques and life-saving courses within a surge channel, just because there's so much awareness that can be learned. And when you're in and amongst the rocks like this, in New Zealand, they have a full course, they call it rock frolicking. And it's the awareness to be able to help people who do get stranded on rocks, because that's their favorite place to go when they're in the water and they're panicking. They want to go for something solid, which is the last thing you actually do want to do. It's the most hazardous escape. And then they get stranded there. So in order to do proper rescues, you need to be pretty comfortable around them. With our life jackets, essentially our full wetsuit gear, we can keep our foot in front of us and push off rocks. We can be buoyant, staying above the water in these surge channels, and we can learn so that our panic buttons don't turn on. So that's what I take a lot of these surf instructors or surfers who are taking these courses through, to see what happens to them, because it's easy for the overwhelm to come in, and we don't know until we get in and amongst this. So I've created just a little video about some of the rescues that I've done, some of the practices that I've practiced, and just some of the techniques of, what it might look like. And if you're looking at it, you'll really see a little sense of what the surge channel does. Look to see how fast it flows. Look also to see where it starts off shallow and then goes deep really quickly in a short distance.
Protect your body and slide away. Can you slide away?
Watch out when you go down. You're gonna hit something.
I'm gonna dive for it.
So we're working with a mannequin here. If people were drowning, these mannequins are filled with water, so they simulate about 150 pounds. And they're practicing to really choose one, if you see any of those orange pieces, or we simulated ourselves to do the same sort of thing.
Yeah, so you can just see how challenging it is to rescue from an area like this, to rescue from the rocks. A lot goes into learning to be prolific in this area. So this is not something we recommend you practice on your own. Take one of Shandy's courses.
Yeah, these parts usually overwhelm everybody, and we always have backup plans if anybody, isn't managing the moment. You can see it goes wide, it goes narrow, it goes up, it goes down. They're working with the surge, and then they were having to work against the surge, all in different moments. And there's no dictation of how it's actually going to go. It changes, throughout the 20 seconds that they do their little moment of practice.
So you can see the foam on the top of the water here. That foam is also a great indicator if you're walking down to the surf and you're wondering which way a current is flowing. Pay attention to those little details. You can see how the foam is moving here. You can tell which way the water is essentially pulling. So a great little indicator to you.
Look at the knee deep shallow, and then instantly it went right up to the shoulders.
So Yeah, the search channels also leads us kind of into the next hazard, which is unexpected waves. These are known as surge waves, rogue waves, sneaker waves. They've got lots of fancy names. But yeah, keep in mind too that like larger waves can appear in sets anywhere from about 5 to 30 minutes apart, just depending on what is happening with that swell forecast. So again, this is something that it might seem like a lot right now, just like learning how to read like a forecast and things. A surf shop is an excellent resource. But yeah, so pay attention that just because you go down to the beach and it seems relatively calm, it doesn't mean that's the case, because these larger sets can come in and kind of take you by surprise.
Yeah, especially in the summertime here, we get what we call groundswell, and we get large period windows in this groundswell. So in the wintertime, it might be, if you're looking on your forecast tools, a 7-second period on a 5-foot swell. But in the summertime, it could be the same 5-foot swell, but with a 20-second period. And that's going to create a much different wave. So if you are trying to get to know some of the surfing and you look down at one of the beaches and you spend your usual like 1 minute, I really want to get into the water, I'm ready to go. Oh, it looks a little small. And you're like, I'm not going to surf here. I'm going to go to a bigger place, and you leave. Well, the person who actually has the patience to watch that for 5 to 10 minutes will see the huge set come through and know this is the beach to surf. Meanwhile, you've gone off to another beach and it's all chaotic, and you realize that you missed your whole surf session and it never turned out very well. So there is a reason to, look on Surfline. That's a great forecasting tool. Environment Canada has big marine reports that give a window that shows you on a large scale what to do. It's for the boaters, but we use it as surfers as well. And like Krissy said, call your local surf shop and just ask them which is the best beach to go. Get some local knowledge. Usually it's right at their fingertips. They've already checked it twice that day. We
Yeah,
look at these
we never mind those
3
phone
times a
calls at
day.
the shop. Yeah, so give us a call. Like we would so much rather have that call of you asking what is an appropriate beach than the call that we need to do a rescue.
Yeah, and it's not just that this one swell is going to give you all the indicators. You match it with the tide, you match it with the wind and the direction that the beach is facing. It took me over a decade probably to put all the information together. So at that time, before I was ready to kind of integrate all the information, I would go down to the beach and I would just watch it, and I would surf in it when it was smaller. And every time you look at the beach, it looks small because it's a long distance away. It's the funniest comment I hear people say, and the kids are looking out there, it's so small. And then we go for our little coaching and the waves are too big for them, and it's just that concept constantly is a thing that we got to remember. The ocean is big and powerful. It moves so much. So learn as much as you can, and then just start with smaller steps so that you get a read on what's going on.
All right, this is our kind of a favorite and potential last topic, and that is rip currents. So there's lots of different types of rip currents out there. There's longshore currents, also known as side shore, flash currents, circulating, headland currents, etc. And currents can be dangerous because they can definitely pull you towards rocks or pull you into deeper water. And paddling against these currents is just tiring. It's essentially like a river of water flooding back out. So at a wave, all the water comes into the bay. Well, all that water has to go somewhere, right? So it creates channels of water that flow back out into the ocean. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about rip currents. And rip currents cause about 80% of our local surf rescues here. So they're definitely the biggest troublemaker in the area.
You definitely will learn a lot taking a lesson. You're going to be working with a side shore current. Another name for it is longshore or feeder, because it's feeding into the current that's going out to the outer ocean. So if you learn your boundaries and can work along with those currents, you're going to learn a little sense of what they look like, what they feel like, how strong they can be, and how to navigate getting out of them. That's going to be in a safe zone during your lesson. It will give you experience so that you learn to avoid paddling out near the headlands. It just happens to be that along rocks, islands, any of those headland areas, it has had a time where the sand has been scooped out by the water flow. So it's got a deeper area, and the water works by its own law, which is the law of least resistance. So when it's finding a way to go back to the open ocean, it's going to move along those deeper channels, wherever they be. It might be in between little sandbars. So if you see the whitewater, it's breaking on that shallow sandbar area, and it's in between there or along the rocks that the water's going to flow. The funny thing there is that it looks the calmest, it looks the most inviting. It's where the chaos is and all the white water is that you actually want to be. So when caught in one, you really want to stay calm. That's harder said than done. You want to hold your surfboard with you, and it's your flotation, and keep your head above the water. All these currents do not pull you under the water. There's no such thing as an undertow. So you can stay buoyant, you can stay with your surfboard, and if you figure out how to go with the flow of them, you'll figure out some escape routes. You do have to go, as if you're floating down a river and heading down the bank. A lot of the new kind of ways of explaining that I've told people about is to aim for the white water. That's where it's going to push you back into the shore, and it's obviously shallow underneath there because that's what's making the wave break. If you cannot self-rescue, don't go out. And you got to think about, if you lose your board, can you swim back in? And this is why in all my life-saving courses, I get people swimming. They swim the currents, they feel the flow. They need to know what they can manage and what they can't manage. And some of that's the panic button. If you're in overwhelm, you're not going to swim as well. You also just got to sense, well, where's the path of least resistance? If I can't manage it, what's my next plans? So you really got to know your limits before you go into the water. We're going to take a look here at some escape routes. Krissy, you can talk about this one.
Yeah, so this is a graphic that you'll probably see at like our local beaches here. This is essentially, showing you if, if you were to be caught in this current into this river, the easiest escape is to go, parallel to the beach. So you're going essentially sideways before you can get out of that current, and then you're able to come in. You can see that they've identified here that the currents are definitely going to be stronger where you're seeing rocks or headlands. But keep in mind too that sometimes at a longer, wider beach, two sideways currents can come in, meet each other, and then push out. So it's not always just the headlands that are the problem. It can also be sometimes just in the middle of the bay. So don't fight the rip. Do not try to swim against it. You're just going to tire yourself. It's like running on a treadmill. You want to paddle out of it before you attempt to come in. So we're going to show this on some more specific locations in this area, kind of our two hot zones.
Yeah, and just before we go there, I think one thing I keep realizing is that a lot of people will see other surfers or other people going along the headlands and finding these little rip currents, and so they follow them. But the reason why surfers are using that is because it's a conveyor belt. It's an easy way to get past the lineup or into the lineup zone, pass through all the waves. So we will utilize it once we know what our limits are and we know what our capabilities are. We've got strong paddling to be able to escape it at the right timing and then catch the wave immediately for our own ease. It's really fun and it can be useful, but it's because we built our skills to know when we're escaping it, how far we go, what exactly does it do. Every rip current that you see a surfer go out on, they probably have put in some practice. So they've felt the strength of it and the speed of it.
All right, so this first slide here that we're showing you is actually probably our most lethal area in all of the West Coast. This is Lovekin Rock out at Long Beach. So the incinerator parking lot is near here, and this is that big island, that big rock that you see. So you can even just see, looking at the slide, the way that the water is forming around it. It's creating those deep channels on either side of that rock. The tempting part is, let's say this is actually an example of what happened a few days ago. There was a family and the children were playing, kind of in that middle area where the whitewash looks the smallest. They didn't have wetsuits on. They were just, splashing around in knee-deep water. A wave came or some surge and swept them out into deeper water where they could no longer touch, and the children started drifting towards Lovekin Rock. Then the father, leapt in to try to save the kids, but again, he was not in a wetsuit. He didn't have a flotation device, and he ended up getting swept out to the rock. So, in an act of desperation, they climbed on top of the rock. However, they were just then trapped there. Again, we can't reiterate enough that Coast Guard does not service this zone. This is not essentially their area that they are, in kind of patrolling over. So those folks on the rock just had to sit there and wait until some surfers came by and actually helped them jump back into the water, load them onto their surfboards, and then paddle them in. So this is just one example of so many that have happened in this area. To the right here, Shandy's going to talk to you through this graphic, because even though it shows the rip current, it's actually incorrect. So yeah, Shandy, take it away.
Yeah, it can look like this, where you've got your longshore current. I'm not sure if you guys can see the arrow, but it will move then into feeding into the current that goes along one side of the rock, or sometimes it can go along the south side of the rock. And these are your typical ones that you can get out of this zone. The dotted line here kind of shows that it is actually a hazard throughout the entire, square rectangle around that rock. And typically what happens when people really do get into trouble is that it seems to pin us against this north edge of the rock here. There can be really great surfing here. So you'll get these little peelers off the side, and then it gets too strong for certain moments or certain people as they are trying some of this in here. The tide comes in at a mid tide and it just changes everything. Some of these places get stronger at low tides where the currents just start ripping right out. And so trying to escape it parallel is not an option at this point. So what you want to do is actually go with the flow of it, and it will flow you. This is a circulating rip around the back of the rock and back onto shore. So there are plenty of circulating rips around rocks where if you find that flow and you feel it, you're going to go around back, and then you actually come right onto shore, and everything is a lot easier than trying to fight that current. So you do need to learn the maps, and you do need to look at the signs, but there's more to them. There's a lot of experience that goes into understanding these.
Yeah, and then this next slide that we're just going to talk about is close to our hearts. This is Cox Bay. This is the right-hand quarter of Cox Bay. And this is where locally in Tofino, we're seeing the most, rescues and accidents happening. Again, you can see in the diagram to the right, the way the rip currents are. There's usually one along the headland to the left. There's one along that rocky headland to the right, and often a current that meets in the middle. So Sunset Point, Pettinger Point, although it is a great area for expert surfers, it is not at all advisable for beginner surfers at all.
Yeah, we've practiced rip currents here, and it's actually surprised some of the surf instructors that were in training. On a low tide, when it starts getting stronger, you get in there for a little swim because Shandy's told you to, and then all of a sudden it's stronger than some of the surf instructors were capable of paddling away. And a lot of what happens is that going along the rocks here is great, but once you get out to that headland, or if you stick inside from the headland a little bit and try to escape it, it triangulates and it widens out around that headland. So then all of a sudden you've got a much further distance that you got to escape and get out of its push and to be able to go back in. So it will just circulate and push the person back towards the rocks. And they're going to do that a few more times before they realize how far they have to go. The distance that they'll need to go is usually lining up with Long Beach Lodge, which is, when you're in the water, it feels like you're halfway across the bay in order to get out of these currents. So again, it's not ideal. You might have to go around the whole headland. What happens here is I think beginner surfers try to be good, and they're kind of in this end, not fully by the rocks, but they don't realize that the current's going to flow towards it and cover, maybe 100-meter distance. Today with the kids, I actually covered the entire Cox Bay from the south headland to the north headland. And they even got out at one point and they were trying to hold their ground, but it just moves that much. So if you're in the middle of the bay thinking you're doing good, you got to do your landmarks. You got to find some ways of kind of figuring out, am I moving towards this area? And if you're ever coming anywhere close, you might as well just get out and walk, a further distance to keep in that zone. There's a really neat story that I'd heard from a couple of friends who their friends had the experience of getting caught into this rip current at the, if you look on the map there, the south end or the left-hand area of the bay. They actually got pulled out all the way to the headland. And if any of you guys are familiar with that headland, it goes out really far. So when they were out there, two of the three of them ditched their boards. They did the classic scramble for land, let's get to safety. And their plan as they ditched their boards and the boards got, pretty wrecked up on the rocks and stuff was that they're going to walk back. This place is a pretty high, pretty dense Salau, bushwhacking terrain. And they attempted that while the third person stayed with their board and stayed in the water. And if you look at the picture on the left of the actual waterway, that person went with the current and ended up floating all the way over to this next sandbar here, which is actually South Chesterman's. It's quite a distance away, but that person arrived there in half the time than the people bushwhacking. He was still waiting for his friends to land on the sand, when they did all their, telling of their stories and timing and everything. So people have a lot of experiences. We are seeing this place with repeated experiences, I guess you could say, from these people, and it's not easy to deal with, and it's the surfers taking the time out of their day to go into a hazard zone that's difficult to manage.
So the best way to avoid getting caught in a rip current in the first place, one, educate yourself. Two, pick yourself a landmark. Make yourself even a small grid, maybe a log or a tree or something on the land, as well as possibly, if you're going into deeper water, something along the headland. So you essentially make like a little grid so you know if you're getting pulled to the left or to the right. And just, be aware of it. And if you find yourself drifting quickly, get out and reset yourself. So, yeah.
Look at any of the big buildings on land, because everything's going to get small when you're out into the open ocean. And look, every wave you take, you really just gotta be alert. And it's more than you think. And the distance you want to cover is, to get away from these areas is also more than you think. So.
Perfect. And then just the last two slides we have here is just a couple of quick videos. Like we mentioned before, Shandy and I are both CoastSmart ambassadors, and we can't say enough about what a great resource CoastSmart is. So after this, we highly suggest you all pop onto that website and check it out. Go ahead and show our videos.
Look at all our references.
I'm a life-saving instructor. I certify anyone from the younger kids to the surfing instructors that wish to work for a surf school. To be CoastSmart is to work with the skills and awareness that you have, find out the hazards, talk to people about the things that you might not know about, what the tide is, what's under the water making the waves break, so that you're aware that as soon as you're floating, you're susceptible to currents and danger. And from there, learn how to use your equipment. Learn how to be safe with equipment so that you're not hurting yourself or other people, and you know exactly what that means. Find out from a school, from a professional, how everything works and how to start from the beginning. Buddy system would be having a person in the water with you that you know that you're going to keep an eye on each other. Buddy system can also mean that you're going out to the water, but you've got somebody on land who knows where you're at. They know what beach you're at, they know what time you've gone out, and about what time you're going to come back in. And you've made that acknowledgement. Know before you go near the water. Be CoastSmart.
I fell in love with the ocean at a fairly young age, and I just wanted to make it part of my life. I love teaching people about the ocean. I love educating people. It's my dream job. Over the years, I've definitely seen people make some bad decisions. People entering the water unprepared without wearing proper equipment or using their equipment properly. People not paying attention to warning signs, warning them to stay away from rocks and headlands. I've seen people get caught in currents and going into conditions that are beyond their ability. I've seen it all. An important thing that I always like to remind people is to just know your limit. There definitely is a surf etiquette that all surfers and beachgoers should be aware of in the water to make sure that everybody has fun and there's avoiding any types of collisions. If you are paddling out the back, just to know to avoid other surfers and to sacrifice yourself always to the whitewash when you're paddling out. When you are catching waves out the back, just a reminder that it is one surfer per wave, and it's the surfer who's closest to the peak that has priority when surfing. Taking a surf lesson if you plan on surfing is a great idea. For one, it just helps to eliminate the dangers and also to highlight the dangers that there are in the area that you may not be aware of. You want to make sure that you're aware of your surroundings, so watch out for people in front of you before you take a wave. Anytime you're entering the water, it is a good idea to let somebody know if you are planning on surfing alone. Better yet, just bring a buddy with you. Know before you go near the water. Become CoastSmart at coastsmart.ca.
Here's the
There we have
quiz if you guys want to take it at some point. I think it'll be in the chat box as well. Thanks for listening.
Well, thanks for talking. Wow, honestly, a absolutely superb evening, and you guys are great presenters. I really do appreciate that. There's a lot of questions people want to get to. I'm going to start firing them off right away. I know when it comes to tides, I put in the thing there, it varies depending on where you are. Like along the coast, the tides change. Tides are not only just based on the day; it's also based on your location. My watch happens to tell me the tides for the location my watch is in. Do you have any specific apps that you like on your phone or something else for tides?
I use Surfline myself. Surfline it's a great resource for everything, for your swell, winds, and your tide. Yeah, that's pretty much like a one-stop shop for the West Coast here. But
Cool.
it's not always the most accurate. Take it with a grain of salt.
Tide will be.
Yeah.
The tides will be.
The tide part will be accurate, but
Yeah.
the wave prediction is not always.
The fortunate thing about tides is they're actually mathematical, right? So
Yeah.
it might not be able to tell you exactly how high or how low the tide is, but the actual tide time is a mathematical calculation for a particular part of the Earth. So most applications should get it right, I would hope.
Just
Yeah.
watch because it can get confusing when the times change. You know,
Very good. Yeah,
watching
absolutely.
properly, or you get set on the wrong region. I always
Yeah.
double check my watch.
I don't blame you, especially when you're traveling, right? You're going to be in another place. You're thinking in one time zone. Your watch might be in the old time zone. You're in a new time zone now. Got to keep an eye on it. Another person asked, where do they find the protocols for dealing with wildlife, like the sea lions? I noticed there's a little bit on the CoastSmart website, but not a lot into there. It says, look at the Parks Canada website. Do you know of other resources that might be helpful?
Yeah, Parks Canada probably is going to be your best bet, is digging around in there. They go into, I think, a little bit more depth, but essentially, like, my rule of thumb for out here on the West Coast in the water is that if the sea lions are, barking or showing themselves or being a bit more like aggressive in showing, then it's just time to leave. There's certain times of the year where they do tend to be a little bit more active. It could be, I don't know if it's their mating season or what. You'll notice a few times. So, just remember that it's their playground. It's their home, and it's just our
You're
playground.
visiting.
So we can just remove ourselves from that situation. So, luckily, as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been, any major run-ins with wildlife here in the surf. But again, just be cautious.
Yeah, I feel in the mating season with the sea lions, it's going to be springtime. And what's happening is that the males are trying to attract the females, and you in a wetsuit are threatening their ability to find their mate.
Ah.
So give them space.
Because we're looking too good in our wetsuits. So
In general, giving wildlife space is pretty much a good round topic or suggestion for everything. Lots of questions, as I mentioned. Quick one: are mud flats a problem in your area? Like,
yeah,
I know it's outside Port Moody here. People can get stuck in the mud flats. They can't get out, and they end up like the fire department has to come and get them.
Long walk for Krissy on her.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I haven't heard of any rescues having to be done from the mud flats, but you do have to be aware that on the inlet side, if you refer back to those earlier slides, you can see the good aerial view of the mud flats, like on the other side of the peninsula there. And when the water does drain out, it empties, like there is no water left. So if you're going canoeing or stand-up paddleboarding, definitely something you want to be aware of. It just makes for a really embarrassing and muddy walk back in. But I don't believe I know of any rescues that have had to be performed from those mud flats.
Yeah,
We'll be the
nothing worse than
first.
having to drag a canoe off a long distance or
A big portage.
unexpected portaging. Yeah. I think this question is probably going to be talk to the local resource, but what is the good time of day, day of week, time of year, weather, et cetera, to avoid busy surfing areas? So generally the rule of thumb is go in the off season and lousy weather. There's not as many people there, but there's also more hazards and risks associated with that, right?
Yeah, so as a beginner surfer, if you want to avoid like major crowds, surfing earlier in the morning is probably going to be your best bet. The beach doesn't really start to pack in with people until around 10 or 11 a.m. And from that 11 till 4 can be quite busy. Again, sometimes we see a bit of a bump up again at sunset, but that's usually more for, surfing when you're a more experienced surfer surfing out the back. But yeah, the mornings are, a good time. The beach does tend to be a little bit quieter.
I think the other rule of thumb is when you look out and you see a crowded beach, it seems to be the general beach and the easy beach to say, yes, there's waves here, but there's going to be a smaller beach that people don't go to as much. So today, for example, everybody thought Cox Bay was going to be fantastic, but if you looked at North Chestermans or South Chestermans, there's still waves there, and especially for the beginner. So you could have the entire beach to yourself because you choose to have smaller waves, and there'll be plenty for you. They might be onshore with the wind, so it wouldn't be necessarily where some of the intermediate surfers are choosing to go, but it's actually going to be a better wave for you because that wind is going to create more whitewash, and it's going to be a lot more fun because you don't have to worry about other surfers. So consider your options of other beaches.
Sandra, do we still recommend people do a trip plan when they're going out surfing? Yes, like if they're planning to go to the quiet thing, let someone know about it. What are our thoughts on trip planning, training, and taking the essentials when surfing?
Yeah, ideally for sure. And I think Shandy mentions it in her YouTube clip there. She talks about letting someone know where you're going, having a buddy system. Yeah, plain and simple. It never hurts. It's always great to let someone know where you're going. And we have an AdventureSmart trip plan app for that. If that's news to anyone who's joining us this evening, it's free of charge to anyone in Canada. So if you're traveling, you can use it for your road trip. You can use it for surfing. You can use it for hiking. You can use it for paddling, mountain biking, whatever you like. And all of the fields are there for you to fill in. If you're wondering, like, what goes into a trip plan? Just fill in the fields and you'll see you add your group's information, how many of you are in the party, how many of you are surfing, what your skill level is, your time on the water and return time. And then you choose your emergency contact very strategically so that they know what to do when and if you don't return on time. They know the protocol, they know who to phone, and they know the process to get underway.
Good tips. We'll ask one more question, and I'm not getting to everyone's question. I hate it when that happens. But one last question. We've been talking a lot about surfing. I know when we talked briefly about wading and stuff like that. So what if I just want to do a little swim? Am I still going to have to worry about the rip currents and such if I'm just going to like swim along the beach just so that I can say I swam in the Pacific Ocean?
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah, you're probably more at risk than anyone because at least with surfers, we are swimming essentially with a flotation device. And if you're just walking in the water, your feet are kind of acting as anchors. It's actually, someone who's swimming is going to be a lot more susceptible to current than someone who's just wading or walking in or someone who's actually paddling on a surfboard.
If
Life
you want
jackets?
this, a life jacket's fine. Some people put on bright gear or have like a little buoy that they drag along. But the key essential is go to one of the beaches that have no waves. Find that protected area at Mackenzie Beach. It's fantastic for swimming at when it's the summertime and there's not huge swells coming in there. More enjoyable. and you're still in the Pacific Ocean. So you have swam in the ocean.
Yeah, because the good thing to remember, the bigger the waves are at a beach means more water's coming in and more water's getting sucked out. So if you can go to a beach where the waves are a little bit smaller, chances are the current's going to be a little bit lighter, but you do also then want to keep in mind your tidal current.
And do your trip planning. Tell somebody where you're going. Go with a buddy. After I've learned this from AdventureSmart, I recommend anybody going into the ocean, even if it's for a couple hours in a session, at least make some sort of way of mentioning, to a coworker or to your friend or family where you're going. Give it a broad statement if you're not sure exactly which beach. I'll be at this one or that one, and I'll be back in 2 to 4 hours. And that way you do have a backup plan.
It's a great lead into what we're going to do next, which we're going to watch a little video which talks about trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. At the end of that, we've got a whole bunch of stuff to give away, including lessons from Surf Sisters, so you can actually get these folks training you, which is just absolutely amazing. So hang tight or hang loose, or what's the right appropriate thing for surfing?
Sure.
There you go.
Stick around.
Stick around anyway. On the other side of this, we'll be giving away stuff, and you could win some pretty cool prizes. Stand by.
So, you want to be AdventureSmart.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
But what is being AdventureSmart?
Being AdventureSmart is really all about taking responsibility for your own safety and following the 3 T's.
Got it. What are the 3 T's?
What are the 3 T's? The 3 T's are the trifecta of outdoor safety: trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. The 3 T's can vary from person to person, activity to activity, and season to season. But here are some important ways to ensure you are prepared and safe on your next adventure. Trip planning. We could go on forever about this one. Trip planning is an essential step and one of the easiest ways we can stay safe on our adventures. This is something that should be done every time we head into the outdoors, whether for a few hours or multiple days. Trip planning can be broken down into 4 simple steps. Planning your travel route and navigation is about picking a trail or route based on its difficulty that's relative to your experience, ability, and the amount of time you have. Know your limits. Not all trails are created equal, so know the terrain and conditions. A 10-kilometer hike scrambling straight up a steep mountain is a lot different than a 10-kilometer stroll around a lake. Before you go anywhere, check the weather and keep checking it as things can change fast. This includes wind, precipitation, temperature, and sunset times. Finally, make sure you leave a comprehensive trip plan with a trusted contact. Keep in mind, this may not be your mom or dad or best buddy. Choose someone you can count on if you were to get into trouble. A comprehensive trip plan might be as simple as sending your trusted contact a text or email with key information about your activity, or using the AdventureSmart app, which allows you to enter a detailed trip plan. Training doesn't mean being an elite athlete or being queen of the mountain on Strava. Training is a continuous process of outdoor recreation. It's about developing the necessary skills and abilities to be safe. This might include working your way up to that big summit hike, taking a few courses to expand your wilderness and backcountry knowledge, navigation and route finding courses, or even learning more advanced skills like rescue and emergency training. You have planned and trained. Now make sure you take the essentials. Taking the essentials means packing everything you potentially need to stay warm, safe, and dry if an emergency unexpectedly arises. What if you rolled your ankle or got hurt? What if you got lost and had to spend the night outdoors? Take the time and be prepared to look after yourself. So that's it. Those are the 3 T's.
That's it.
But no matter how hard you train, how well you trip plan, and how much essential gear you bring, you may still find yourself in an emergency. And that's okay. The wilderness can be unpredictable. If you find yourself in an emergency, it's important to stop, Think, observe, and plan. Use that essential gear you brought to stay warm, dry, and safe. And contact 911 on your emergency communication device. Remember, search and rescue in BC is free for everyone. Remember, safety is an outcome of good trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. It's your responsibility. So let's all do our part and be AdventureSmart.
There we go. Sandra, we have things to give away. I want to remind people, by the way, how we do this. So over in the chat portion, so not the Q&A portion we were using earlier, but the chat portion, I need you to answer the questions that Sandra answers. Now, some of these, we have multiple winners, which is going to be super cool. So it'll be the first 2 or first 4 people who answer, depending on the prize. And some of them, we only have 1 to give away. But we've got 4 questions. There's one that was hiding. And we're going to go through them all. And whoever puts their the first correct answer, or the second correct answer, in case if we have 2, or third or fourth, if we have 4, in the chat, we're going to contact you via the email that you use to register. So this is all done on Zoom. So at this point in time, Sandra, would you care to ask some questions?
I would love to. The first prizes we're going to give away are thanks to Krissy. Thank you, Krissy, very much for offering these. We've got surf lessons directly from Krissy's shop, and maybe it would be her or Shandy. I'm not too sure. Either way, you're in great hands. We know that after tonight. Man, that was so much great information. I just want to talk about it and continue, but let's get to the prizes. Here we go. So again, we have 2 individual lessons to give away here. So the first and second answers that are correct to this question win these lessons. I find this interesting, and I've known it for a long time. How many lifeguards are working on the coast in and around where Krissy and Shandy work?
Krissy, do you want to take that one? What's the answer? I see it being put in the chat.
0. 0.
Yes, we're not excited about that number, but
No.
that's the right answer right now. So congratulations to the first 2, and Scott's going to keep a good record of that, and we'll get in touch with you directly. Thank you. The second prize to give away is an awesome light source from Bright Source. They provide us giveaways for our winter and summer webinars. They're just great. This one was really interesting too. You know, I love to come to the coast, but I don't eat, breathe, and sleep it like I play on the land. So this was interesting, but how many feet does the tide swing in and out?
There we go. Shandy, you want to take that one?
We got some smart people here. 14.
There you go.
Nice. Awesome. That's a lot. That's a lot. Anyway, moving on. And this is an awesome, it's an individual detector from Reco. This is a great product. Doesn't take batteries, don't have to charge it. You don't have to do anything. Definitely encourage you, if you win this prize, to check out the website, Reco, RECCO. This was an interesting, and I love this part of Shandy's presentation. The question is, in a surge channel, what gives you indication of water movement? I think it might have been Krissy brought up this, and I thought, wow, that's a great thing to keep in mind, to keep forefront. And it was interesting, I thought, because it was
Krissy, your thought on that?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a few things. You can use debris, but foam is probably the easiest, like actually looking at the bubbles on top of the water. You could even throw a leaf in, a twig. That can show you the movement of the water. Often, sometimes, even when I'm walking on the beach, when I first enter the beach, I look down and I just even see if I can see a bit of sand or that foam moving on the surface of the water, and it's going to indicate right away if I've got a longshore current pulling this way or this way, or if I'm in a surge channel, what is happening.
Perfect.
so helpful. Last but not least, this will be the top 3 answers that get this one right. We can give away my boat card. It's offered to you. This was helpful too, and Shandy shared a great story around this. Thank you for that, Shandy. How many inches of water does it take to move those large logs on the beach?
Wow.
This is something else. And I knew this too,
Shandy?
but it's always good to hear it.
Yeah, it surprised me too. 4 inches. It really felt like 2 inches, but I think, you can go with the 4 inches. It was very unsuspecting.
Yeah.
Putting on my emergency Sorry, go ahead.
I was
Krissy.
going to say that's 4 inches for a 1-ton log. So,
Yeah.
you know, logs can be smaller than that. So, you know, it can be even less than that 4 inches. But yeah, it's just shocking that you can essentially move the weight of a truck with 4 inches of water.
And in fact, in my emergency preparedness, when I wear that hat, I talk about in flooding situations, your car can actually be carried away by a 4-inch thing of water, and you can absolutely be carried away by 2 inches.
Yeah.
Water is extremely powerful. I think that's it.
It is. We've wrapped it up. Thanks to everyone who stayed after our timeline. We know we said 6 to 7. It's a little bit after, but my goodness, I could sit for another hour with these two. I seriously could. So next time I'm in Tofino, you guys, I'm knocking on your door. Trust me. Just to wrap up on a few things, Parks Canada has coastal stewards. And when I was chatting with Natalie yesterday, she was letting me know about some great work that they do. They have outreach teams that a team of 8 every day, all summer, are on the beaches and educating, aiding, engaging with visitors and residents. So that's really exciting. And for National Drowning Prevention Week, which is coming up July 21st to 27th, Parks Canada on July 25th will have events and games, educational opportunities for you. And it give you that really one-on-one opportunity to learn a little bit more if you're in the region. That's July 25th. Last but not least, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Shandy. Thank you, Krissy. And last but very not least, thanks Parks Canada and to the West Coast Inland Search and Rescue for all you do. Everyone enjoy your summer. Have an AdventureSmart and a CoastSmart last few months as it stays sunny and great to get out there and enjoy the water. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for
Bye.
having us.